So, if you're not Canadian, this will probably be news to you. July 8th, 2022. 1 week ago, the Canadian telecom company Rogers experienced a service outage. Yes, this is what goes for newsworthy events in Canada. It's even got its own Wikipedia page. What makes it newsworthy, though, is the fact that Canada has one of the most overregulated, monopolistic, and protected telecom markets in the world. The big three companies, Rogers, TELUS, and Bell, control most of the market, with the rest being divided by the middle tier Shaw, which Rogers is currently trying to buy up, and the few smaller regional competitors that are still somehow surviving. As such, the Rogers outage affected 12 million people out of Canada's 38 million. 25% of Canada's total landmass lost internet connectivity. Interac, the main electronic financial transaction service, was down nationwide as they use Rogers. Their phone service was down, including emergency services, leading to one death that could have been prevented had the people at the scene been able to call 911. Approximately 25% of Toronto's traffic signals stopped working as they used the Rogers wireless network to communicate timing between intersections. And the overall economic impact to the whole of Canada is currently estimated to be at around $142 million, and rising as the outage isn't totally fixed yet. I was still online because I use Bell. And yeah, Bell sucks a big one too, but they're the only provider in my area that offers fiber optic internet, so what are you gonna do? In fact, that's how most of Canada feels. They're the only provider, so what are you gonna do? Most places in Canada, you've got one option. There's sometimes more options than the larger cities, to a point, but the market's still extremely regulated, with little real room for actual competition. And you can tell just how bad it is by looking at these prices, in Canadian dollars, of course. An unlimited calling and texting cell phone plan with 12 gigs of data for just $115 a month at Rogers. 15 gigs for $160 at Bell. Oh man, $175, $125. Look at these deals. Meanwhile, in Australia, it's converted into Canadian dollars, $43 a month for a cell phone plan with 30 gigs of data. 44 Canadian for 40 gigs of data. In America, AT&T offers unlimited data for 91 Canadian. Virgin offers the same for 78. In the UK, 54 Canadian for unlimited. 46, same thing. 41, same thing. In India, it's the equivalent of $8. Though that might not necessarily be the same. We're not comparing first world nations anymore. But I think the point is made. Canadians are getting fucked by telecoms right now, to the point that it's actually cheaper to get an American cell phone plan and pay roaming charges. Regulation has a unique secondary role in Canada, the primary role being the same as everywhere else, where the government imposes standards on private business with the intention of ensuring a specific level of quality, or widespread coverage, or safety depending on the industry. This isn't automatically good or bad, it depends on what the regulation is, but it almost always has the unfortunate side effect of raising the barrier of entry into the market. If your new fledgling company with your new idea that'll disrupt the marketplace can't afford the additional imposed cost of implementing the government regulation, your company is not getting off the ground. This leads to a lack of competition, which leads to a lack of innovation. Companies become stagnant. They begin to monopolize the market. And once they're sufficiently protected by government regulation, they begin to jack prices up, because what are you going to do? Now, as always, things aren't this simple all the time. There are some industries that naturally trend towards monopolies due to the particularities of their specific market or product. And in that case, regulation to promote competition and prevent monopolies can certainly be good. And in other cases, markets that are highly competitive on their own may need to be regulated for some other reason, since not everything we value can be best obtained by market forces. But as a general rule, regulation, even necessary regulation, even regulation that we don't want to do away with, represents an extra cost for business, which makes it harder for new players to compete, giving the big corporations an advantage. But, as I said before, Canadian regulation serves a dual purpose, and the other one is a strange form of Canadian protectionism. Yes, every country wants to see their own businesses flourish, and not only have foreign corpos come in and control everything, and Canada is no exception. Uncharacteristically compared to the world's generally free trade-loving liberal parties, the Canadian Liberals have historically advocated for tariffs on certain protected Canadian industries, even within such frameworks as NAFTA. But there's also a cultural component to this conversation as well. The Canadian government is extremely worried about the cultural powerhouse that is the United States. There's a fear, probably well-founded, that within a completely free market, Canadian media would be absolutely dominated by American exports, American music, American TV shows, American movies. And so the Canadian government always uses its regulatory powers to mandate that a percentage of all broadcasted media in Canada is made in Canada by Canadians and about Canadians. And this mandate has greatly empowered both the creators and the distributors of Canadian media, with telecoms, whose infrastructure the media is being transmitted is on, playing their part in that process. Sometimes this protectionism can play a positive role. For example, I recall it being kind of a fight to get Chinese compromised Huawei tech out of the telecom networks of the US and the UK, while in Canada, the Make It in Canada message made that move a no-brainer. Also, it's just funny to me that this sort of nativist, Canada-focused language comes out of primarily our left-leaning parties, the Liberals and the NDP, when if you swap Canada out for America, it almost sounds Trumpian in a way. But the telecom situation in Canada has been a known problem for years. Nobody is actually happy with the way things are going, except for the companies themselves who are making a killing, and the government, who is all too happy to use the powers of a privately owned monopoly for its own purposes. A marketplace that has been so heavily regulated and protected such that only a small group of players are able to operate is an industry where the government has only a small group of players to deal with in order to achieve its goals. And there is certainly a push within Canada for the government to exert more control over the internet and telecommunications in general. In 2018, an organization called Fair Play Canada popped up, which claims to be a coalition of Canadian artists, content creators, unions, guilds, producers, performers, broadcasters, distributors, and exhibitors who are asking the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, to take action to address the theft of digital content by illegal piracy websites. What this actually is an advocacy group headed up by a bunch of corpos, most notably Bell and Rogers, two of Canada's big three telecoms, advocating for the government to grant private business the legal right to filter the internet in Canada to exclude pirated content. And of course, there's no reason to believe that this power would stop there. In 2019, a Canadian court ordered Canada's telecoms to block access to Gold TV, an IPTV service that broadcasts around the world, including in Canada. In case you don't know, IPTV is just regular television broadcast over the internet, rather than over satellite or cable. It's not the same as downloading content, nor is it the same as Netflix or YouTube, where you choose a video or show or movie to stream, but rather it operates like traditional TV, where you pick a channel. It just transmits over the internet. But Canada's telecoms market, being protected from competition, hasn't felt any pressure to move towards IPTV, even though it is the latest in TV technology. So Gold TV started doing it on their own. Where Gold TV fucked up is that it never got permission from the channels it was broadcasting to do so, fair enough. But the issue is, the court saw fit to just blanket ban access to the service across Canada at the ISP level. There was never any chance offered to Gold TV to go legit, or to shut down Gold TV's service in Canada on their end. Instead, it was simply decided that you could not access their service, not that they could not provide it. In 2020, Trudeau's heritage minister announced on CTV that any creator of Canadian media would, under their proposed new regulations, would have to get a license in order to do business.
You've got an agency that wants to enhance its scope of powers to determine what's a trusted news source. So the first question will be, who's to define that? You've got a lot of these groups.
This is a recommendation, Evan.
Okay,
it's
no,
not,
but they
the
recommend.
CRTC hasn't decided.
Okay,
anything.
but they're recommending that. They're recommending that
Yeah.
Content providers have to register and get a license. So how will this work? How are you going to regulate websites? How are you going to register all that? Do you buy these recommendations?
Well, one of the recommendations, so you're talking about a couple of different things here, but as far as the licensing is concerned, is if you're a distributor of content in Canada, and obviously, you know, if you're a very small media organization, the requirement probably wouldn't be the same as if you're Facebook or Google. So there would have to be some proportionality embedded into this. But we would ask that they have a license, yes. Just like right now, but with the old system in Canada, distributors needed to go to the CRTC and to have a license.
Oh no, we're joining the UK as license cucks. This received a massive amount of blowback because this demanded not only entertainment media, but news media, journalists, obtain government-approved licenses in order to operate within Canada. And there was a public outcry over the idea that the government would be the arbiter of who is allowed to report on the news or not. But the heritage minister didn't seem to think this was a big deal.
There is a concern that the panel wants to regulate international companies as well. So let me take an example of a controversial site like Breitbart. How would the government force a company like Breitbart? The New York Times, Mother Jones, the Daily Mail, how would they force those companies to comply with rules of Canadian content, discoverability? And if they don't comply, what happens? Will Canadians be blocked from accessing international sites?
I don't think that's what's recommended in the report, that these sites be blocked in Canada. I'm not sure I see what the big deal is. I mean, we have an incredible number of international corporations that are operating in Canada in all sorts of sectors, in the financial sector, in the construction sector, in the energy sector, and these companies comply with Canadian rules and laws. We're a sovereign state.
All of this stuff would have come into force if Bill C-10 had passed, but it didn't. The House of Commons gave it their stamp, but Parliament was dissolved for the 2021 election before the Senate could vote on it. However, it's back again, this time as Bill C-11 with a few changes, passing again in the House of Commons on June 21st of 2022. And just like before, we're still waiting to see if it'll pass in the Senate. The general idea is that the CRTC needs to be expanded to include internet content, and that any internet-based business with significant Canadian revenues needs to be registered with and be regulated by that commission, and be obligated to create and promote Canadian-focused content, just like TV, film, and radio in Canada. The Conservatives attempted to include a clause excluding user-generated content into the bill, only to have it shot down by the Liberals. The Heritage Minister went on to say that individuals with large enough followings, or who generate enough revenue, will be considered broadcasters, whether or not they actually consider their online presence a business or just something that they do for fun. This is a situation where big business and big government are all too happy to wash each other's backs. The corpos get state-backed monopolies where they can continue to drive prices upward, knowing that there's no legit competition for their customers to turn to. The government gets regulation, which controls their citizens' access to media that they both consume and create. The Conservative Party in Canada, for all of its problems, does not have the stench of corruption on them that the Liberals do. And while Trudeau promised to end the Liberal corruption that was so commonplace under Chrétien and Martin, it does not seem like he's succeeded. However, that's a wider conversation. I've done previous videos on Trudeau's many corruption scandals, from the SNC-Lavalin shit show, where the Quebec-based construction company gave money to the Liberals and received preferential treatment in return, to the We Charity shit show, where the charity was given a big bag of money by Trudeau's government, and Trudeau's relatives were paid by the charity for consulting work in return. But Canada just seems to be more generally a country of goofy corruption and incompetence. There was also that Nova Scotia shooting. I did a video on that a while back, where it turned out that the RCMP, Canada's federal level police like the FBI, were so awful at their jobs that they sold to a man with a criminal record surplus RCMP gear, including RCMP vehicles, which he used to pose as an officer in order to get people to trust him before he killed them. Like, I know we're laid back up here, guys, but whenever a scheme in Canada comes to light, everybody involved doesn't look like an evil mastermind who's receiving a just downfall. Instead, they all look like doofuses who are dumbfounded they were caught. I think there's this perception in Canada that because we're so small and unassuming and polite, especially compared to the loud, boisterous, hyper-nationalistic, hyper-capitalistic United States, that no matter what we do here, it'll never be as bad as those evil Americans. And I think that leads Canadians to excuse a lot of shit that we really shouldn't be excusing. Our corporations and our government is just as capable of being corrupt and fucking people over, just like any other in any other place. It doesn't matter that we have a reputation of culture and politeness. All that means is that they'll be polite as they rape you. And insofar as the telecoms go, that's exactly what they're doing.